Welcome to Undercurrents of Romance, the show that celebrates every subgenre of romantic fiction. In each episode, I peel back the layers of your favorite love stories and chat with the talented authors who bring them to life. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn. Now, let's dive in with today's guest. Hello, romantics. I'm here with New York Times bestselling author Susan Wiggs to talk about her new novel, Wayward Girls. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's all my pleasure. I assure you. So how's life on the island?
You know, summer is here, 4th of July right around the corner, so zero complaints at this time. If you were to call me in, November through, say, February, I might have a different answer, but it's lovely here at the moment.
Yes, I was talking to another author who lives in Seattle just yesterday, I think it was, and she said it was about 80 and low humidity, which is not what I'm experiencing here in North
Yeah,
Carolina.
no, this is where you want to be in the summer.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds great. Well, besides living your best life on a beautiful island, what else can you tell us about yourself and your writing journey?
My writing journey has been going on, I think, if I did the math right, this is year 37 of me
Oh,
being
wow.
my first book. Yeah, thank you. My first book came out in 1987. I was a school teacher living in Houston. I had a small daughter and I was teaching at a small independent school in Houston. But I had always written, even from, before I could even read. I was telling my mother stories and having her
Yeah.
write them down and dictating things and, obsessed with the library and books and language and everything all my life. And I always wrote. I wrote through high school and college and graduate school and I practically turned my graduate thesis into a novel. So I was primed and ready and
Oh,
was obsessed with romance novels, historical romance novels of the 80s. Very,
yeah.
very politically incorrect and super entertaining. I'm
Yes, yes.
not gonna deny the entertainment factor and thanks to things like Bridgerton and
Hmm.
Rivals, the Jilly Cooper thing on Hulu. They're making a comeback now, which is kind of cool. But anyway, that's what I was drawn to as a reader. I was also drawn to big thrillers, which are like what you write.
Yeah.
And I just knew I was a very commercial writer. I was not going to write literary fiction for the ages that they study in school and they rot on the shelves in the libraries. I wanted my books to be the kind that readers, they fly out the door and take to the beach
Hmm.
with them. And so I kind of built my career around that. So I did a number of historical romances. I also did a little bit of a switch myself and started writing, when I was in the middle of being a mom and a single mom and that sort of thing. I was drawn to women's fiction, I guess they would call it. I try not to call it that because it's, fiction is fiction. And
Yeah.
so I wrote contemporary novels, and that was kind of my way forward. I wrote some very, very, my agent would call them aspirational series where they take place on this perfect idyllic Willow Lake in the Catskills or on the coast in Sonoma, So I tend to be drawn to aspirational places, which brings me to probably the most unusual book that I've written, which is Wayward Girls. It's the one that's
Yeah.
coming out this summer, and so I would call it none of those. It's not part of a series. It's not in an aspirational setting, but it's very, very much tied to issues that are really important to me, women's issues.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And did you find that shift going from historical romance to contemporary? Did you find that a difficult shift, or was it more of a natural, organic thing that happened?
It was a really I was so lucky with my publishers at the time, Mira Books, which is an imprint of Harlequin,
Hmm.
and what was it, Grand Central, which is an
Mm,
imprint of Hachette. Both of them found those, kept those readers who were the fans of the historical romance and expanded into a space where the readers enjoy contemporary novels. So I was really lucky that they helped me with
yeah.
that transition. But I would say moving from super, super commercial fiction in that genre to the topic around Wayward Girls it remains to be seen. We'll see. I mean,
Yeah.
will my readers who like these beachy reads embrace Wayward Girls, or are they going to go, that's a little difficult right now. I don't want to take you to the beach with me, maybe in the bathtub where I drown myself.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great that you have a publisher who embraces your need or desire to do something different, because sometimes I think, and what I've heard over and over on this show is that, having that palate cleanser from time to time really
Mhm.
ignites your imagination and makes you feel, I don't know, excited about maybe going back to a series that you've been writing for a little while and things like that. So, but with Wayward Girls, I'm keep looking down because the book's on my desk. The Wayward Girls, you have just, you were talking about labeling things, not women's fiction. And I was struggling because normally in my intro of a book, I'll say what the genre, the subgenre is, but I had a real struggle attaching just one to the story because it has a little bit of everything, right? It has romance and mystery and suspense. There's a coming of age element to it,
Mm,
and part of it is set in what many would consider a historical timeline now. I'm
right.
not buying it yet. I'm not buying it yet, but a historical timeline. So I guess my question to you is when you're talking about this book, how do you describe Wayward Girls? And maybe just go ahead and give us an overview of the story while you're at it, if you don't mind.
Well, I think that the reason it's a little difficult to categorize is it spans 50 years. It starts in 1968 and it ends in today's world.
Yeah.
And so when you're writing like that, you write about everything. It's about all the struggles and all the loves that fill a person's life.
Mhm.
From teenagerhood, young teenagerhood, all the way to old age. And so I'm with you. So the thing that inspired it is I kind of made an emotional journey with my big brother John to this little town in Western New York near Buffalo, where we both grew up. And we moved away as kids. My dad got a job in Europe, and so we moved overseas. But when we were little, 10 and 12, we lived in this little town and had never been back. And then John sadly got sick with pancreatic cancer. And so we were kind of doing his bucket list, and he wanted to go back to the town where we
Ah,
grew up. And so in 2021, we went back and we found our old house and our old haunts and our old ski hill and all the places where we used to play as kids, and seeing it through your adult eyes is such a different kind of sensation. And we went to this very big Gothic church. We were raised Catholic, had to go to catechism in church, and I had what was, I guess you would call it not a recovered memory, but I was triggered to remember something that I hadn't remembered or thought about since I was probably 10 years old. John was a altar boy for about 5 minutes, and he was the guy who swings the incense, the burning incense down the aisle. It's
yeah.
called the thurible, and the kid who swings it is the thurifer. And he got a hot coal on him and his sleeve caught on fire or something, his robe. And that's all I remembered. You know how you have
Yeah.
these little snippets of
Hmm.
little childhood things. And and
Yeah.
I asked him, did that happen? He said, yeah, I think it did. He barely remembered. And so for some reason that sparked a conversation about what the world was like in 1968 when we were little, and somehow it came up that we had babysitters who sometimes went away. You know,
Ah.
these teenagers, we would play with them, they'd be our babysitters, and then we didn't see them for a while. And so I kind of did a deeper dive into the the whole influence of the Catholic Church in this part of the world. It was very dominant. I mean, lots and lots of Catholics around, Irish Catholics, Italian Catholics, and it led me to this place. I went down a research rabbit hole at the Buffalo History Museum and, of course, on the internet, and it brought me to a place at 485 Best Street in Buffalo, and it's a big 1880s complex called the Good Shepherd Institute. It was at the
Mm.
time. It's not called that anymore, but it was where they would send girls who had unplanned pregnancies. They would send girls who were truant or failed out of the foster, I should say, who were failed by the foster care system, and that it was run by these really strict nuns. And,
Yeah.
you know, I'm a true crime fan, so, of course, dove deeper, and I actually found, like, a Facebook group where people it's called Buffalore, and they talk about old Buffalo and their memories of old Buffalo, and I've just posted, just a very, very brief question. I said, "What do you know about 485 Best Street?" in the '60s, and I got like overnight, I got like 500 notifications, and everybody was
Wow.
telling me their impressions and their experiences. I found a survivor group of girls who had endured their time there, and suddenly I'm
Wow.
off to the races.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so the main girl in the book, the main character, her name is Marin O'Hara. Her mom is a strict Irish immigrant, and ends up she has a stepdad who's not very nice to her, and so
Mhm.
to protect her daughter, the mom sends her to the Good Shepherd, and there she meets a girl who likes girls, and grandma sent her there to be reformed from that. And there was a girl who was Odessa. She was caught up in a racial incident, and thanks to the color of her skin, she was the one who was found to be at fault. There's a girl, and I sort of peopled it with young women 15 to 17 years old who
Mhm.
typically would be placed in a place like this, and what their experience was, and what saves them. And it's not a spoiler to say what saves them is believing each other, believing
Mm.
themselves, and girls coming together with a common purpose. I don't know. Anybody who knows teenage girls knows that when you put like 5 or 6 of them together with a common goal, there's kind of no stopping them. And so that was the backdrop of the novel. And so it's in part so we get to see their experience at the Good Shepherd, and then how their lives play out after that. And I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
that
that was really long-winded.
no, that
You
was
can work on
great.
my
I
elevator pitch.
no, no, I love the origin story and how how the idea came to you because that was going to be one of my questions. And I love that you have a bit in there about your brother.
Yeah.
Not to I don't
Well,
want to give
the
anything
scene with
away.
the
There's
altar boy catching on
yes,
fire
yeah,
definitely,
yeah.
definitely is a moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I'm glad to hear that that was something
Yeah, it
that
made it into the
you
book. There's a lot
yeah.
that didn't. I'll tell you the things that didn't make it into the book, I have no regrets because they were actually too harsh. And I think
Mm,
people, and you probably encountered this in your fiction when you're reading about a crime or an
yeah.
incident or something like that. Sometimes it's so over the top awful that you're like, I'm not going to put that in my readers' heads.
Yeah. Yeah, well, each of the Wayward girls, they had unique and heartbreaking backgrounds,
Mhm.
and
They were sort of archetypes. I think they're fleshed out, living, breathing characters, but I wanted to make them, each unique in their own way, and so
yeah,
hopefully we carried that out.
you did. You brought them to life just beautifully, and I was really curious about did did the research that you do inspire their backgrounds, their stories, or
Yep.
was that pure imagination on your part?
No, it came out of my research. There's one girl, I won't tell you which one, who joins the very first graduating class of West Point. And there's one girl who ends up kind of working with a famous record label and write. There's always got to be a writer. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I would be reading, whatever. You know how you sort of
Hmm.
wander through your research at the time and making notes, and then that would inspire, oh, she could do that.
Yeah.
Because, as writers, we only live one life. And so we've got to invent the other ones and make them feel like they, are separate from us.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Now, I don't want to get into spoiler zone here, but how difficult was it to write about Angela's
Yeah,
struggle at
that
Good
was
Shepherd?
Angela
Yeah,
was probably she's not the main character, but she's the best
yeah.
friend. Um, it was really hard, and I'll tell you the best support that I got with Angela's storyline was a librarian.
Mm.
And also a writer friend who has since passed away, Dorothy Allison. She wrote Bastard Out of Carolina. You're probably familiar with that
Yeah,
part of the
yeah, yeah.
world. And ha- she and I were talking years ago, probably 20 years ago, and she said, a librarian saved me because I didn't know who
Mm,
I was. I was having these feelings, and I had a horrible, horrible home life, and and she said at the library I was treated with respect, and they showed me stories and books that reflected me, which is such
mm,
a hot issue right now. We're trying to, are we really going to take these books away
yeah,
from people,
yeah.
and that's going to like cure them from being gay? I think not. But
Hmm.
in the 60s, this poor girl didn't understand who she was until a librarian just sort of opened her up to
Hmm.
who she was. And unfortunately, she was victimized by this whole Good Shepherd system in the worst
Hmm.
possible way. And
Yeah,
so she had quite a journey. I hope that her healing was a long time coming, but hopefully readers will agree that she ended up with a life that mattered, that was meaningful. So yeah, we'll
yeah,
see.
yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, uh these are characters that are going to live with readers for quite a while after they shut the cover to the books. I know they will for me, and yeah, it's
Oh, well, thank you. Well,
yeah,
I happen to be listening to the audiobook version right now. I got an early listen
nice.
of it, and there's nothing like a really skilled narrator. This one actually has two narrators, Cynthia
Yeah.
Farrell, who is Irish. Farrell is an Irish name,
Ah,
so I was happy,
okay.
and Jane Oppenheimer, who narrated one of the best audiobooks I've ever read called The Frozen River.
Mm.
It's a big book. Anyway, I heard her read The Frozen River, and I requested, oh, could she be the reader for Wayward Girls? And they said yes, but because it's such a big book, we're going to have two voices. And so they have two voices. And I'm
Uh,
listening right now, and they really, what you said, they bring each character to life in her own
mhm.
way. And
Yeah.
I'm really pleased to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's great. I hope your readers make the transition from contemporary to this because it will be well worth it for sure.
Well, thank you.
Um, you betcha. So betrayal plays a big role in this book,
Mhm.
for the different characters in different ways. Is
Mhm.
or was that a theme that you intentionally explored, or did it reveal itself while you were drafting?
Oh, I like the way you put it. It definitely was answer B. It revealed itself. I rarely start a book saying this is going to be a book about betrayal and redemption or something like that.
Mm,
These things seem to emerge from the story that I'm telling, sometimes as I'm telling it. And I definitely make a lot of, as a writer, I make a lot of wrong turns and go down
uh,
some dark alleys and figure out, no, that's not where I want to go. And so with this book, I would say that theme emerged as I was writing the first draft, but a little before that, because I did, of course, you share your book ideas and your synopsis with your literary agent and editor, if you're a working writer, or your writing group, if you're
Yeah.
an emerging writer. And so um, sometimes it takes another reader to point it out. And I think during one of my conversations with my editor, she brought up that aspect of the story, and I thought that's probably a really important takeaway from this book. I hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it will be because I think it's still reflected in today's society in many ways,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But
Yeah.
so one of the things I like to dive into on this show is finding the story's undercurrent with the author. It's that what I call the second beating heart of the story that tends to flow beneath normally the main point of view's
Mhm.
journey. Um, what undercurrent is flowing beneath Marin's story, do you think? And there could be multiple.
Yeah, when I started listening to some of your broadcasts, which I really like, by the way, I love
Oh,
listening
thank you.
to so many different perspectives, and I'm one of those writers who's always convinced that some other writer has a secret and she's just not telling me. And so,
Same.
um, I would say that the undercurrent is it's pretty simple. It's about all the loves that fill a woman's life. Um,
Mm,
there's her initial family love and her relationship with her father, her biological father, not the stepfather who came along later.
yeah.
And it's an arc of growth that I wish for everybody. I hope it's not as hard as Marin's was, but she built a life on her own terms, and I loved that for her. And I I think the undercurrent was hard work and believing in yourself. Everything she did was hard, but it was worth doing.
Hmm.
And the rewards weren't always immediate, but they were there for her. So I was pretty pleased to be able to tell that kind of story about Marin. So her undercurrent would be this really sturdy, irrepressible spirit, no matter what.
Hmm. Yeah, and she had that spirit, she had that belief in herself at an early age, even while she was in, this Good Shepherd place. And one of
Yeah.
my favorite scenes was when I'm trying to figure out how to word this without spoiling anything. It was when she left the laundry and went after Angela, who was going to a required appointment, and she
Hmm.
wouldn't let her go herself. And she stood
Oh,
up. She stood
yeah.
up to that person. And that just, I was like, oh my gosh, I just love you, Marin. No, it was
Yeah.
such a great, powerful
She was such
scene.
a caretaker in her life. She realized
Hmm.
nobody's going to take care of her but her. Her big brother, she was really close to. I was
Mm,
close to my big brother, um, and he was her mentor and protector. But he was drafted, and so
mm,
suddenly she's by herself with mom and stepdad, and she figured out she had to look out for herself. And her way of doing that was to learn to look out for others as well. And I think
yeah.
her leadership role, it was real fun to write about. It was,
Yeah.
it was that badass kid that we all wish that
Yes,
we were, right?
absolutely. I wish I was, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at this point, I normally ask my guests to talk about tropes, and I know that this isn't what we would call a fully fledged romance. It does have some romance in it. Um, can you think of any possible tropes that readers could look forward to while reading this story?
Some of my favorite love story tropes they're slightly hidden in
Okay.
this book, but for Marin, the teenage crush trope is there. And then it sort of matures into another favorite of mine, which is Friends to Lovers, where you
Ah,
might be
yes.
aware of this person, and you have these feelings, but you're not sure, and you might not be in the right place for it or the right time of your life, and then it's sort of a push pull until finally there's a that moment when you are, the Harry met Sally moment when you're
Yeah,
finally going to surrender to this. So that's one of my favorite tropes, and
yeah, that's a great
hopefully
one.
it's a powerful moment in the book. I tend to, and this, I don't know if this is a perk or a flaw, but um, I tend to idealize the guys in my books. I happen to be married to a guy who's just so all around great, that
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
easy to imagine. But I do get feedback from readers saying, "Oh, come on, he's too good to be true."
That's okay. You know what? Sometimes that is just fine. That
I know,
works
I know. If we
absolutely.
can't have them in real
Yeah,
life, let's have them in books. And I
right.
wish for everybody they ultimately find it in real life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Have you read a maybe a romance book or a recent book that you really would recommend to our listeners, and why?
I would. Let me think. I read all the time. I mean, that's why I write. I write so that I
Yes.
can make time to read. Actually, two recent ones. One of them's not such a love story, but it's called Before Dorothy, and
Okay.
it's the story of, get this, Annie M.
Oh,
Before Dorothy by
nice.
Hazel Gaynor. It's pretty new out now, and there's there's a lot of love in that book. I wouldn't call it a romance novel.
Okay.
For romance, you would love, especially in your part of the world, Beach House Rules by
Okay.
Kristy Woodson Harvey. I want to say her name right, Kristy Woodson
Okay.
Harvey. Just such a warm-hearted, feel-good, perfect beach book. Those two I've read in the last few weeks, and thumbs up to both.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I always like to include something for readers, a little extra in the show notes and things like that. So I appreciate that. Now we're going to go behind the scenes a little bit
Okay.
and kind of look and see who Susan is when she's in her writing element here.
Mhm.
Um, what's your favorite thing to do when you finish a book? How do you celebrate or treat yourself?
Yeah, it's sort of evolved over the years because I've been writing for so many years. I used to be a young mom, and so it would be like, I would actually try to have everything in the house picked up at the same time. That
Yeah,
was my only goal. And as you know, as a writer on deadline, some things sort of fall by the wayside. And so in that phase of life, it was more about organizing my actual life, as I matured and my daughter grew up and went away and I remarried and then
yeah,
I started to be more mindful of myself. And I hope that writers and listeners, and especially women, don't lose themselves in the career family, you know, organizational triangle. And I realized that that was something that needed attention was me. And so
yeah,
I tried to take more time for myself, for health and fitness, for reading, travel. Luckily I have this very lovely husband and we have a nice life on the island. And so I try to take time, but as a working writer with commercial, aspirations, you also have to be mindful of your publisher's needs. They
sure,
don't
yeah.
actually support me if I want to take 6 months off and go to the beach. And so
Why not? It's
yeah,
just
I
so,
know, I know.
yeah.
I've tried to find that balance
Yeah,
between being a productive writer and taking care of myself and my immediate family. So it's a balancing act.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so physically what I do, it's I'm sorry to say, I pick up my office at the end because there's always for me, and probably for most writers, there's always that push at the end of a book. You're like the horse that sees the barn and you're going towards the deadline. And once you get there, you look around and you're like, well, I haven't touched that pile in, 4 months or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I definitely try to step back, take a breath, look around, what needs doing. And so it's not sexy. I usually do. I do usually, you know, get drunk and fool around with my husband, but I'll do that on deadline or
Perfect.
off. So
You
yeah,
don't need a end of the book
that's right.
celebration for
That's
that. That's
right.
great.
But
That's good. That's a very own love story right there.
yeah, and I always have a stack like this high. I bought was it a trilogy you did with two other writers?
Oh, one of the Seal Ridge
Yeah,
series.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Oh,
have
thank
that.
you.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah. And so
gosh. Wow,
on
thank you.
order, and so that's like in my stack or my virtual
Ah,
stack if it's on my e-reader. But
yeah.
yeah, I always have things waiting, and it's like having a treat with
Oh,
no
nice.
calories. So yay.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we go, can you give us a hint of what's up next?
Um, I'm in the stage where I'm actually working on my favorite book. And I'll tell you why it's my favorite book, because I haven't spoiled it yet by writing it. And so, yeah, yeah, right now I'm in that hunter-gatherer stage.
Yeah, that's a
When
great. I love
when
that.
I'm looking for the story, I'm like a magpie or that sees something shiny and I put it in my pocket, And so I'm sort of gathering thoughts and things that are coming to me, and eventually I'll lay it all out on the table and maybe see if I can piece it together like a quilt. But right now
Okay.
I'm in that and it's very fun, it's very distracting, and I will knuckle down, but maybe later in the summer.
All right. So enjoy your summer. That sounds great. All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, folks, when this episode airs, Wayward Girls will be out, so be sure to order your copy today. You can check out Susan's website at susanwiggs.com. Susan, what social media platform are you most active on?
Instagram for sure.
Inst
It's
okay.
super easy, and I have a really nice helper who helps me get the things out there, and so that's probably the that one, and Susan Wiggs on Facebook, both of
Okay.
those.
Both of those. Okay, great. All righty. Well, Susan, thanks so much for joining me. It was a pleasure to meet you, and thanks again for writing this amazing story. I know your readers are going to love it.
Well, I so appreciate being here. It's yeah, there's my favorite people in the world are readers and writers, so thank you
Uh,
for having me.
you betcha. Well, many thanks to everyone listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Undercurrents of Romance. You can find more information about the show at traceydevlin.com/podcast. Undercurrents of Romance is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. I'll be back soon with another great romantic read. In the meantime, enjoy the adventure, everyone.